Hi everyone, I just want to let you know that I am starting a new series. This will be about the 3D mesh creation for real-time VFX. And most of the time it will be Houdini. Obviously you might use those techniques in other softwares as the knowledge is transferable obviously across all the softwares. So you might want to recreate some of those in Blender or 3ds Max or Maya. But the basic idea is to show you what is my thought process behind creating those 3D meshes, what kind of techniques I use, which are mostly procedural ways to create a 3D geometry, how I use vertex colors, and what kind of UVs I'm usually using whenever I am creating those meshes. So as you can see right now on my screen, I've got this beam effect, and I've actually used a couple meshes there, which is the cylinder and the plane. I use variety techniques for the meshes. I use some vertex colors, some UVs, and obviously everything is procedural in Houdini, so I can just change one value if I want the tube to be a bit longer or shorter, and it's just gonna apply those changes instantly. So in this video, I actually want to show you how to create very basic plane like this one in Houdini with some vertex colors and procedural UVs. And also I want to show you how to create this cylinder with the same setting basically in Houdini. So nothing complicated, very basics, and I think it might be like a good introduction to Houdini if you never actually used it for real-time VFX. So we're gonna start with meshes first, and who knows where we're gonna end up later on. Maybe we can do some explosion at some point. But for now, treat this as a very basic introduction to Houdini when it comes to real-time VFX art. Now in Houdini, I'm just gonna press tab. I'm gonna start typing geo and gonna get this geometry node. This will be our container for the cylinder and plane and generator. Before we dive in, make sure you've got SideFX Labs installed. It's a list of tool sets that you're probably gonna need for this tutorial. Probably you're gonna use only UVs, but it's very handy to have those available to you anyway, because the more you're gonna do in Houdini, the more you realize you need those tools. Okay, so if you can't see this tab here, press the plus button, go to shells and enable SideFX Labs tab. Once here, you can just select this tab. If you can't see the icons I've got here, you just press the update toolset and it's gonna ask you to restart Houdini. So I'm gonna press it, and there should be pop-up window, install the latest version or update, and restart Houdini. Obviously I'm not gonna do that because I already got this installed. After this, I'm usually enabling this real-time button. So if I'm doing any animation or simulation, it's gonna play the speed of this in real time. And I've got this window divided here, so if you would like to have similar or the same view, just change this to games here. Okay, and now I'm just gonna dive into this geometry node. Now we have SideFX Labs installed. Hopefully you can press tab inside of your geometry node. Whoops, not this one. Tab and start typing cylinder, and you should be able to see Labs cylinder generator. So I'm gonna click this, and in here it requires the curve input. So I'm usually press tab and try to get a line. There you go. I'm gonna plug this in, and straight away you'll be able to see a cylinder. Because I am creating this mesh for the beam, what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna change the direction of it to X and increase its length maybe to 5. I'm gonna dive into this cylinder, and I'm probably gonna change the radius to something like 0.5. And it's something that I can already use. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna reduce these segments maybe to 8. Or maybe let's get 16, because it might be fairly big on the screen, so we might even increase it to 32, but I think 32 might be a little bit overkill, but you know, you never know. It's something that you have to test, and because it's a procedural, you can always come back and tweak it. For the V segments, I'm just gonna get rid of it to reduce it to 1. You also have the ability to create caps for your cylinder, or if you need a half cylinder, you can do that as well. You can add twist if you want, but obviously it probably requires to have a lot more V segments. But if you are having like a panning texture that goes across the cylinder, and you want this to go in some weird direction, you probably want to create UVs first and then add the twist later on, and it's gonna just follow the direction of the faces. So I'm not gonna add twist here, and I'm gonna go back and get rid of the V segments as well. The curve wrap is usually if you want to have a tapered version of that cylinder, but also it allows you to create some curvy shapes as well. So I'm just gonna add this by clicking the left mouse button. I'm gonna right click, set interpolation to maybe Bezier on all of those points. I'm gonna add some V segments as well. And as you can see, we're kind of having this curve and geometry now. I'm just gonna go back to default. I just want to show you that it's actually there for you if you need it. So I'm gonna change the value to 0.5 and this one to be 0.5 as well. I'm gonna get rid of the V segments again. And I think that's the very basic cylinder. I often use this generator because it's very handy and it's got a lot of options there for you already. So for example, you can add noise to it, but obviously you need some V segments for this noise to be visible, and the vertex colors as well. So you might leave your V segments as they are here, but to be honest, I prefer to have something a bit more optimized. It's not like you need this to be optimized. However, every tiny bit of optimization helps later on in the development. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to get rid of the V segments. I'm going to center this cylinder on the grid. So I'm going to try to find labs align, axis align. And that's gonna bring this cylinder in the middle. All of those I'm gonna set up to center. And now I'm just gonna bring a box next to it. That's the box. I'm gonna actually increase its size maybe to 5, 5, 5. And what I'm gonna do, actually, I'm gonna create a boolean. And for the boolean, I'm gonna use maybe intersect. I don't think subtract's actually gonna work, and this is not what I want. I actually want to intersect. Maybe I'm gonna now go back to this box and reduce the size of it to 4. I'm gonna go back to Boolean and try to find a better operation, because what I actually want to do, I would like to have an edges where this box is, okay? Because I want to apply vertex color to the ends of the cylinder, so we can use the vertex color in the engine later on for the transparency. Because normally you would use like a alpha texture if you want to fade those. However, you can use the vertex color on the geometry, but because I'm trying to create a bit more optimized mesh, I'm just gonna create edges on my own, and I want this to be procedural as well. Okay, so the shatter might works. Let's try something else maybe. Seam, intersect, union. And let's go with shatter because it gives us what we want, I think. The only thing is it creates those caps that I don't want actually, so I'm just gonna try different options, see what's there. And we still got to get those caps, so I'm gonna use fuse after it. I use this fuse mainly because sometimes whenever you're doing like a Boolean operation, there are some vertices that are just acting weird, and just to make sure everything is merged together, the fuse helps with that a bit, okay? In case you're gonna get some errors later on. So I just like to fuse those points anyway. Right, so as you can see, we got this inside cylinder, and I just want to get rid of it. So I'm gonna go back to Boolean and try to find something, because maybe there is something already for us made by this node, and we don't have to do any additional operations. Okay, so instead of shatter, maybe let's go to custom, and maybe let's try to use merge adjustments pieces. And to be honest, I found this by mistake, so feel free whenever you're in Houdini to experiment. I'm gonna use this, and this is exactly what I want actually. Cool, so what I'm gonna do next, I'm gonna create some basic UVs. I'm gonna bring UV texture. I'm gonna now navigate to UVs and see how they look. So this is kind of exactly what I want, I think, although they might be overlapping there. So let's try different projection. Just to see what's there and what might work best for us. In that case, maybe we go with the default orthographic projection. Okay, another thing I like to do is to stretch those UVs and make sure they actually fit into the 0, 1 texture size. So I'm gonna bring UV transform. And then UV transform, actually I'm gonna show you this, okay? So let's say you want to shrink your UVs, or you have some uneven UVs like those, for example, okay? You bring in UV transform, and what you actually do, where you see the scale, what you could do, you could type $$ size X. You can copy this, paste here, and change size X to size Y. And as you can see, what it's going to do, it's actually going to distribute those UVs to fit the UV map. Okay, so obviously I use this transform only to demonstrate what happens when your UVs are actually distorted somehow. So I'm just going to get rid of that and keep this one there. Okay, so the next thing is I'm just gonna go back to my perspective view, and I want to group those points at the end. So what I'm just gonna bring group. I'm gonna group this. I'm gonna name this group cylinder edges, because obviously you might want to create multiple groups, but I'm gonna use the edges only. I'm gonna change type to points. I'm gonna disable base group, and I'm gonna go for the include edges and sharp edges. What it's gonna do is gonna just select those edges that are not connected to any other points. I'm gonna call this group cylinder edges. With underscore, And now I'm just gonna apply color. And basically I wanna make those edges, not edges, sorry, the points and vertices at the ends to be black. I'm gonna navigate here, select this group name, and as you can see, now we've got this vertex color applied to the edges, and we can actually use this data to tweak our transparency or opacity just on those vertices. So imagine normally you would probably come up with a texture, or there are multiple ways you can use some material tricks to do exactly the same thing. However, to minimize the operations in game engine, I'm just going to use the vertex color. And now what we're going to have like the 100% opacity around this area, and then it's going to fade into nothing. And now if you go back to the top where you have this box, what you could do, you could change this, for example, to 2. Okay, as you can see, we're moving those points, but we're maintaining everything else, which are our UVs and the vertex colors. Okay, so I'm going to change it back to maybe 3.5. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to use axis align again. And I want to bring this cylinder to a little bit forward. Okay, so I want this end to match the grid. So I'm just gonna use this as a min. Okay, as you can see, we've got this cylinder, and it might work better with the beam that I've created in Unreal Engine. Cool. And the last thing is the transform node. So at the end, I'm usually applying transform just to match the scale of the game engine. So I'm gonna call it game engine scale. I notice in side effects tutorials they usually use the value 100, but I'm actually like to use 50 because it's somewhere in the middle. It's not massive, but it's there in the middle, and I prefer to use 50 over the 100. Okay, so now we've got this cylinder. What we can do, actually, we can go back to the very top and we can create grid. And for the grid, we're gonna use the size of 10. Yeah, sorry, we just want this to be very wide, just to match our cylinder. So I'm gonna get rid of the rows, maybe keep the rows to 2 and get rid of the columns. So we got like a very simple plane. Okay. I think it's too big because I actually want to match our cylinder. So I'm gonna change the size to 5. I'm just changing between the cylinder and the grid, and I'm gonna plug the grid instead of the cylinder. And now we can see we got exactly the same settings everywhere else for that grid. Okay, the only issue now we have with the vertex color. Okay, so what we could do, we could move this group to the side, and we can actually apply a gradient color here. And we could probably use the same gradient for the cylinder. However, I just want to show you there are various ways to apply the color, a vertex color, to your mesh. So I'm gonna get this gradient. I'm gonna change the axis to be X. In here, I'm gonna move this to 0.5, create another one, another node here at the end, change its value to 0. And we're essentially getting this. Obviously, it might not be exactly the same that we got for our cylinders. I'm just gonna move those across, maybe 2.2. I'm gonna create another node here, 0.8, change its value to fully white. And now I can just move those around, maybe to 0.1, 0.9. and we are getting now same transition that we have in our cylinder. Okay, I can skip this color node now because it only works for our cylinder. As you can see, the rest is just procedural. And that way we've just generated the grid, which is just a simple plane with some vertex colors and the UVs. Let's just navigate to our UVs and see if they are actually working as they should. And everything seems to be working as expected. So I'm gonna navigate back to perspective, just preview that mesh. And what I'm gonna do next, just double check if our cylinder is working, just plug this here. And as you can see, we even don't need our group and colored. However, you might use this technique for something else. But feel free to use just a gradient if you want. It's just a one node and it works in the same way basically. It might be easier in some instances. Okay, so now we have an easy setup for the cylinder and the plane as well. Obviously it's just we're just changing one node to another. And this is very simple setup, and we're probably gonna create something similar later on for some other simple types of geometries that we're gonna use, or we might use in various effects. Save that file, and we'll be keep adding to that setup later on. A bit more geometries. We might explore a bit more complex geometries, and we're probably gonna create like a very basic rock generator as well, just so we can get like a very simple rocks for some of the effects that we might make. So the next thing, what we're gonna do, we're gonna try to create a setup for those electricity meshes that I showed you in the beginning of the video. Okay, thanks for watching.